The courtroom fell silent as Judge Raymond Thomas slammed his gavel and declared, "Senator Richard Kennedy, you are hereby fined $500 million for contempt and obstruction." Gasps rippled through the packed gallery, cameras clicked, reporters rushed to capture every word, and Kennedy, one of the most polarizing yet respected figures in modern American politics, sat motionless, his eyes fixed on the man behind the bench. For months, the nation had watched this legal war unfold. Kennedy, known for his fiery speeches and relentless defense of the common citizen, was accused of misusing campaign funds, a charge he had denied from the start. But behind the scenes, whispers grew louder. This was not just a case about money. It was about power, influence, and a system that wanted to break the one man who dared to challenge it. When the verdict came, Judge Thomas's tone was sharp, his words heavy with judgment. The fine, $500 million, was more than financial ruin. It was meant to be humiliation. Yet, instead of collapsing, Kennedy rose slowly from his seat, adjusted his tie, and looked around the courtroom with eyes that burned with a quiet defiance. "Your Honor," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "you may take my money, but you will never take my integrity, and you will never silence the truth." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the bailiffs seemed unsure of their next move. Reporters scribbled furiously, sensing history in the making. Kennedy continued, turning toward the spectators, many of whom were veterans, teachers, and working families who had come to show support. "This fine isn't about justice," he said. "It's about fear. Fear of what happens when one man refuses to bow to a system that's forgotten the people it was meant to serve." Judge Thomas, visibly irritated, ordered him to sit down. But Kennedy refused. Instead, he spoke directly to the jury, then to the courtroom, reminding them of the promises of fairness and democracy. "If standing up for what's right costs me everything," he said, "then let it be known I stood." What happened next was something no one expected. A juror, a middle-aged woman named Marla Jensen, stood up, tears streaming down her face. "He's right," she whispered, voice cracking. "This isn't justice." Then another juror rose, then another, and before long, half the courtroom was on its feet. Judge Thomas's gavel pounded in vain, but the power had shifted. The crowd's chants say, "Justice for Kennedy! Justice for Kennedy!" Echoed through the marble halls. Outside, hundreds who had gathered for the verdict erupted into cheers as word spread. Reporters described it as a courtroom rebellion, an unprecedented moment in modern judicial history. Over the next few days, the story dominated headlines. Analysts debated whether Kennedy's outburst was heroism or hubris, but public sentiment was clear. People were inspired. For the first time in years, they felt someone inside the government had spoken for them and not above them. Within a week, petitions demanding an investigation into Judge Thomas's handling of the case gained millions of signatures. Evidence emerged that the judge had undisclosed financial ties to one of Kennedy's political rivals. Congressional hearings were called, and in a stunning reversal, the fine was suspended pending review. When Kennedy finally stepped before the cameras again, he didn't gloat. His tone was humble, his words careful but powerful. "This was never about me," he said. "It was about us, about what we allow to happen when truth becomes inconvenient. I don't want sympathy. I want accountability, because if they can silence one voice, they can silence all of us." The story became a symbol of defiance, a reminder that courage doesn't always come from victory. Sometimes it comes from standing tall in the face of impossible odds. Judge Thomas would later face ethics charges and be forced to resign. But Kennedy's message endured far beyond the scandal. In the closing months of the year, Kennedy launched a bipartisan initiative to reform judicial oversight, ensuring transparency in cases involving political figures. And though his reputation had been bruised, his spirit remained unbroken. As the sun set over Washington one evening, Kennedy was seen walking up the Capitol steps alone, pausing to look back at the city whose faith he had helped restore. Cameras caught the faint smile on his face, the look of a man who had lost nearly everything but gained something greater, the belief that truth, no matter how buried, still has the power to rise. And as the anchor on the evening news signed off, her final words captured what millions were feeling. In an age of cynicism, one man's courage reminded us all justice begins when someone refuses to be afraid.